And this show is brought to you by the Beaches of South Walton. Find out more about this travel destination at www.beachesofsouthwalton.com.
My name's Marty Clubb, and we're in front of my winery, LEcole No. 41. We're in the Walla Walla Valley in eastern Washington. A little bit about our history. The Walla Walla Valley was settled in the early 1800s by French Canadians with the Hudson's Bay Company, and this community was called Frenchtown. And this is the old Frenchtown School. So we call it LEcole, the school, because of that historic setting. We're in our recently planted state vineyard right next to the winery. And this is Cabernet Sauvignon. You can actually typically look at the leaf structure and identify that as Cabernet Sauvignon. That'd be a classic leaf for Cabernet Sauvignon. And here it is, early July. We went through bloom and we've had fruit set, and so at this point we're seeing berry growth in the canopy. Right now we've probably left a little bit too much fruit in the vineyard. We'll probably crop this vineyard to only about 2.5 tons an acre. But at this point we're kind of leaving a little bit heavier crop to kind of slow down and kind of suppress the canopy growth. And here in a few weeks we'll come in and typically do thinning down to typically 1, maybe 2 clusters per shoot. So one of the things about the vines here is, as in all of Washington State and in Walla Walla, these are on its natural rootstock. Meaning if we get down here lower, there is no graft point. The roots that go down into the ground are actually the same plant as this trunk. What that does mean is we could theoretically be susceptible to phylloxera, which is a little pest that eats on the vine roots and ultimately destroys a viticultural region. We do not at the moment have a big population of phylloxera in eastern Washington, and our soils, which are these really sandy, loamy, silty soils, are not very conducive to phylloxera. Plus we have really hard winters, and the hard winters tend to suppress the overwintering of pests. So as long as we can get away with it, we are planting our vineyards on their own natural rootstock. And that's a real plus for a couple of reasons. One, we believe you get more purity of flavor, more varietal correctness, you might say, because while we think this really is the grape plant, if you think about it, this is pruned back to simply your cordon and your trunk every year, and the real plant is below ground. So you may have, on a young vine like this, the root structure probably is only down about 8 to 10 feet, but a mature plant, say when we get to about 10th leaf on this, will be 20 feet plus down, and so the real plant lives below the ground and draws on the nutrients and the minerals in the soil from that depth. So the real terroir of a vineyard, the real expression of the vineyard, really comes from the soil and what the roots extract from that soil. So being on natural rootstock for us is a real key to our quality. And it's very dry here. We only get about 8 inches of rain a year, which is not enough to grow grapes on. So we augment by using drip irrigation, where it's tightly controlled. We monitor the moisture in the ground. You can see here how truly really dry this is. It's a really fine, sandy, silty soil. By monitoring the moisture, monitoring the health of the vine, we can determine when to start dripping and feeding just a little bit of moisture to it to keep it right on that kind of critical stress point, so that you have some moderate growth, fueling the ripening of the fruit, but not excessive canopy growth. There's this concept that somehow irrigation is bad, particularly as it comes out of the old world, and part of that has some fundamental real truth to it, because in a situation where you're trying to crop a big load, a big heavy crop load, you use irrigation to create a bigger canopy to feed more fruit, and you end up with this watered down, washed out wine. But when we talk about irrigation, that's not what we're talking about at all. In fact, we like to use the word deficit irrigation, because what we're doing is literally leaking just enough moisture to the vine so that it's growing, it's fueling, it's using its energy to funnel nutrients up from the soil into the plant, but it's not so much that it fuels any kind of aggressive growth. We're late morning, we're probably about 85 degrees. Things are really humming along right now. But as we move into the afternoon, when we get into above 95-degree temperature, the plant will actually move into a more protective mode. It'll quit doing photosynthesis. It'll literally shut down and move into, let's go hibernate for a while. And only after it cools off and falls below 95 will it start reactivating and working again. So it kind of self-moderates itself. Right now, during the growth of the fruit, that extra heat actually puts a little bit of pressure on that berry size and weight accumulation. And so in some aspects, that's a really good thing, because particularly for Cabernet Sauvignon, we want a little bit smaller berry size. That way the amount of skin contact in the fermenter is a little bit higher, and so we get a little bit more phenolic, a little bit more tannin, a little bit more flavor development. Basically, we're an inland growing region, so protected from marine influence. That's really important, because what messes up a vintage in Bordeaux is rain too early during harvest. We don't have that problem. In fact, we have a higher consistency factor, because the lack of rainfall means we don't have that accumulating up into the berries or creating mildew problems or whatever else it might create during harvest. We just simply wait until the fruit is physiologically ripe, mature. We're into a cool period, so we don't even have to act fast, because we're typically, 75, 80 degree days, 35, 40 degree nights, and that big diurnal swing in temperature moderates the maturation of the fruit. So we can actually we can look at bloom, look at the timeline, and almost predict harvest every year consistently.